Wyndham Clark stood on the 18th green at Shinnecock Hills with a Shinnecock Hills crowd cheering for someone else, and he won anyway. Then he walked to the microphone and said the quiet part out loud. What he said in that moment left the entire room without a response.
This is not about one victory speech. Clark just earned $4.5 million from a $22.5 million purse, the largest in US Open history. Scheffler, the world number one, playing in the same final group on his 30th birthday, trying to complete the career Grand Slam, walked away with $920,882. The winner earned exactly $3.58 million more than the best player in the world, in the same round, on the same golf course.
Personally, I think Clark's trophy speech is the most honest and self-aware thing any major champion has said at a US Open podium in the last 20 years. And the fact that the crowd was actively rooting against him made it more impressive, not less.
Do you think Clark deserves the crowd's support now, or does the Oakmont situation still follow him regardless of what he says at the podium? Drop it in the comments right now. And stay with me, because what Clark revealed about the Baker Mayfield situation and how it connects to who he became at Shinnecock is the backstory nobody covered correctly, and I am not getting to it until later in this video.
To understand what happened on Sunday at Shinnecock Hills, you have to understand what happened to Wyndham Clark in the 14 months before he teed it up there. In 2025, Clark had the worst public year of any player in professional golf. Not the worst year statistically, he still competed, but the worst year in terms of the events that defined how fans, media, and the golf establishment viewed him.
It started with the 2025 US Open at Oakmont in June. After his final round, Clark damaged property in the members' locker room. Oakmont Country Club, one of the most historic golf venues in the United States, host of 9 US Opens, banned him from the premises, formally. He was required to apply for reinstatement if he ever wanted to return. Then came the club throw at the 2025 PGA Championship, broadcast on national television. No immediate public statement from Clark. The reaction from fans who had already seen the Oakmont incident was severe.
He apologized multiple times, at Augusta in April, at the Players in March. He repeated the apology at every opportunity the press room gave him. But apologies delivered on a schedule that tracks the competitive calendar have a specific smell to them, and the golf fan base noted it. By the time Clark arrived at Shinnecock Hills with a 6-shot lead entering the final round, the crowd had already made a decision. They were not there for him. Here is the specific number that frames what Sunday looked like from inside the ropes. Clark entered the final round at 7 under par, the lowest 54-hole score in Shinnecock Hills US Open history. That record had stood for decades. He broke it. The crowd's response when he did it on Saturday was muted. When Scheffler made birdie on Saturday afternoon, the gallery roared. A player who broke a historical scoring record at one of golf's most difficult venues got a quieter reception than the guy chasing him.
None of that explains what Clark said when he got to the microphone after winning. And what he said in that moment is the part that changes how you read everything else about this story. Here is the exact quote. Sunday, June 22nd, 2026, Shinnecock Hills, trophy presentation interview immediately after completing his second US Open victory. I did some unfortunate things last year that I really regret. Hopefully I can win you guys over eventually, but I get it. There for Scottie. 3 sentences, no deflection, no spin, no I want to thank the fans for their support. He stood on the 18th green, trophy in hand, $4.5 million richer, and told the crowd that was rooting against him that he understands why they were rooting against him. Then he named the specific player they preferred, on camera, in the trophy presentation. You follow this sport. You have watched trophy presentations after major championships for years. You know what they sound like. The gratitude, the thanks, the family mentions, the caddy credits, the sponsor acknowledgements, the humble appreciation for a great venue. That is the template. Every player follows it. Clark threw out the template. He looked at the crowd that had been cheering for his missed shots all day and said, I get it. You wanted the other guy. Some of this is on me. There is no sports media training class that produces that answer. That answer comes from a person who has been thinking about this for 14 months and decided that honesty was the only version of that moment he could live with.
He also said this in a later interview when asked directly about the crowd. They definitely didn't want me to win. New York didn't really like me. I love you guys, but I get it. Some of it's self-deserved. I kind of brought it on myself. A two-time US Open champion said some of it self-deserved about being the villain at his own victory celebration. That kind of self-awareness does not grow in comfortable soil. It grows in the specific discomfort of watching yourself become someone you did not intend to be, publicly, while still trying to compete at the highest level.
Now, here is the part of the Clark story that nobody assembled into a single narrative, because the Baker Mayfield situation is the one that predates the Oakmont locker room and the club throw, and it is where this version of Clark actually started. Clark confirmed in published reporting that his ex-girlfriend had an affair with Baker Mayfield, the NFL quarterback. He described carrying that betrayal for years. The interview where he discussed it was not a therapeutic media moment. It was a player who had been holding something for a long time and finally answered the question because someone asked it directly.
The reason this matters for understanding Clark at Shinnecock is specific. Players who carry personal grievances, real ones, the kind that do not come from golf, either burn them out in competition or let them find other exits. Clark's exits in 2025 were the locker room at Oakmont and a club on a broadcast fairway. Not golf exits, personal exits. Does knowing the Baker Mayfield backstory make Clark's 2025 behavior more understandable, or does the personal history not change what happened at Oakmont? Comment, more understandable or no excuse.
The person who arrived at Shinnecock Hills in 2026 had been through Oakmont, the ban, the apologies, the crowd hostility, and 14 months of carrying all of it in public while trying to compete at the highest level in the sport. He shot 65 in round 1, he broke the Shinnecock 54-hole record, he shot 73 on Sunday, and held on by one shot. And just when you think this is only Clark's story, what the man standing 5 feet from him all day said after the round reframes every bit of it. We'll get to that.
Here is what the narrative around Scheffler's 2026 US Open week promised everyone who was watching. The promise was built over months. Scheffler at 30, his birthday falling on Father's Day in the final round of the US Open simultaneously. The career Grand Slam within reach. He needed only the US Open to complete the set. Shinnecock Hills as the venue, the crowd fully invested in his success. This was the setup for one of professional golf's all-time final round storylines. It was written before Sunday began. Broadcast partners prepared the segments. Social media was primed. The crowd arrived at Shinnecock on Sunday morning with a specific outcome in mind.
What players, and specifically Scheffler, gave up based on that promise? The ability to compete on a neutral playing field in terms of crowd support. The gallery that should have been observing the US Open as a competitive event became, effectively, an extended cheering section for one specific player chasing a specific milestone. Put yourself in Clark's shoes on Sunday morning. You have a 6-shot lead. You have broken a historical scoring record at this course. You have won a US Open before. You know how to play final round under pressure because you have done it. You walk to the first tee, and the crowd is not there for your defense of that lead. They are there for someone else's comeback. 6 shots, and the crowd is singing happy birthday to the man you need to hold off. How do you play? What do you call on when the environment is working against you from the opening tee shot? Clark called on 14 months of practice, being the unwanted person in a room and performing anyway. He bogeyed the first hole. He watched his lead shrink from 6 to 4 to 2 as the back 9 played out. He made a 24-foot birdie putt on 16 that expanded the lead back to 2, which turned out to be the championship-defining shot. He made par on 18.
Here is the question nobody asked directly after Sunday. At what point does a golf crowd's active opposition to a competing player become a factor in competitive fairness? Cheering for missed shots is not illegal, but it is documented by Scheffler himself as going beyond what he was comfortable with. What responsibility does the USGA have to manage crowd behavior in a way that allows all players to compete on an equal emotional playing field? Now here's the part nobody connected. Scheffler earned $920,882 for his tied 4th-place finish at the 2026 US Open. Clark earned $4.5 million. The gap between their payouts in the same event was $3.58 million. That gap is the largest between a world number 1 and the tournament winner in major championship history in terms of absolute dollar amount. It exists partly because the prize purse has grown to $22.5 million, but the structural reality is the same. The best player in the world, playing in the same final group on his 30th birthday, earned less than 21 cents for every dollar the winner took home. Scheffler's total career earnings crossed $100 million earlier this year. He does not need the money in any meaningful personal sense, but the prize structure at a $22.5 million major has now reached a point where the gap between winning and finishing fourth in the same group is larger than most players earn in an entire season. Clark will try to spend some of that $4.5 million in a way that honors what the week cost him. He said publicly after the tournament that his first priority was taking his girlfriend to dinner and getting off Long Island. His girlfriend, Emily Tanner, posted on social media during the round, "Wyndham, watching you block out the noise and play the way you did today was incredibly beautiful. The world may not have been cheering for you, but I was. I love you." The world's most hostile major gallery, a post from his girlfriend, a trophy speech that named the guy the crowd wanted, a $4.5 million check. That is a complete picture of a Sunday nobody wrote the script for in advance. Scheffler was asked after the round how he viewed the day. The birthday, the Grand Slam attempt, the crowd, Clark's performance. His answer was specific and generous. He said, "Being in the arena is not for everybody, and I think it shows a lot about Wyndham, how he handled not only this golf course, but I think the crowd today as well, and is a well-deserving champion." Then he addressed the crowd's behavior directly without being asked to. "The crowd was tough today. I think sometimes it can get a little too much when balls are kind of going off greens and you start hearing cheers. That felt a bit much to me." Read those two quotes together. The man the crowd was cheering for, the man they were singing happy birthday to while hoping Clark would collapse, told you two things. First, Clark deserved to win. Second, the crowd's behavior during the round went somewhere Scheffler was not comfortable with. That is not diplomatic language. That is a player who watched someone he respects get treated in a way he found uncomfortable and said so on the record, even though the crowd's behavior was technically in his favor all day. Scheffler could have said the crowd was great, New Yorkers loved this game, Wyndham played well. That would have been easy. That would have been the safe answer. He gave you his real reaction instead. Does Scheffler's defense of Clark and criticism of the crowd make you see him differently as a competitor and a person, or is this just standard sportsmanship? Comment, see him differently or just standard sportsmanship? The fact that Scheffler's most visible emotional moment of the week was not about his own Grand Slam pursuit, but about how another player was treated, tells you something about what he was actually processing on Sunday afternoon. He did not get his birthday Grand Slam. He earned $920,822, and his most pointed public statement of the week was not about his own performance. It was about a crowd that got a bit much while he was the one they were cheering for. That is a man with a clear moral compass operating in a complicated environment. And the contrast between what he said and what the crowd actually did is one of the sharpest characterizations of Sunday's atmosphere that any voice in golf produced. The Open Championship at Royal Birkdale is days away. Clark goes there as a two-time major champion, a status that exactly 1 year ago would have seemed implausible to a majority of the golf fan base. Here is the counterintuitive number. Clark is now the only active player besides Rory McIlroy with 2 U.S. Open titles. Scheffler has 0 U.S. Open titles. Jordan Spieth has 1, Justin Thomas has 1, Xander Schauffele, who won 2 majors in 2024, has 0 U.S. Opens. Clark and McIlroy are the only players in the current generation of under 35 professionals who have won the most difficult major in golf more than once. That pairing, Clark and McIlroy, is not one the golf media had circled as the dominant 2 major winners of their era, but the record says otherwise. The last player to win consecutive U.S. Opens while carrying a hostile crowd narrative was Retief Goosen, who won in 2001 and 2004. Goosen was not actively disliked by crowds. He was simply quiet and overlooked in a Tiger Woods era where everyone else was secondary. But the structural similarity holds, a player winning the hardest major twice with the crowd's emotional investment clearly elsewhere both times. Clark is not quiet. He is not going to become the overlooked player. His trophy speech at Shinnecock Hills made sure of that. He put himself in the conversation directly, named the crowd's preference, accepted his share of responsibility for it, and asked them to stay with him. Whether they do depends on what happens next. Birkdale is links golf, a different crowd, a different culture, a different relationship between galleries and American players. The British crowd will not sing happy birthday to Scheffler and cheer Clark's mishits. They will watch golf. That neutrality might be exactly what Clark needs to build something new. Here is the pattern that Shinnecock Hills Sunday exposed about how professional golf now operates at the intersection of player behavior, crowd culture, and institutional management. The USGA ran a US Open final round where police ejected fans from the fourth hole onward, where the broadcast captured audible cheering for Clark's misses on national television, where the world number one, playing in the final group, described the crowd's behavior as going a bit much in his post-round press conference. And the USGA's response to all of it, before, during, and after, has been to manage it reactively rather than proactively. Ejections after infractions are documented. No pre-tournament communication to crowds about conduct standards. No post-tournament statement about what Shinnecock's crowd behavior means for how future US Opens are managed. Here is the question the USGA has not answered. When the crowd dynamic at a major championship becomes visibly hostile enough that the defending champion describes it as uncomfortable while benefiting from it, at what point does the governing body's silence become complicity in the environment they failed to manage? Clark said some of it was self-deserved. He is probably right. Oakmont and the club throw are real events with real consequences. He acknowledges that. But the crowd at Shinnecock did not calibrate its hostility to the specific gravity of those events. They brought maximum volume to every hole, regardless of what Clark was doing at any given moment. The USGA ran a US Open final round where police ejected fans from the fourth hole onward, where the broadcast captured audible cheering for Clark's misses on national television, where the world number one, playing in the final group, described the crowd's behavior as going a bit much in his post-round press conference. And the USGA's response to all of it, before, during, and after, has been to manage it reactively rather than proactively. Ejections after infractions are documented. No pre-tournament communication to crowds about conduct standards. No post-tournament statement about what Shinnecock's crowd behavior means for how future US Opens are managed.
The USGA got a US Open final round that will be remembered as one of the most hostile competitive environments in major championship history. They got ratings because of the drama, they got Clark's trophy speech, which will be replayed for years, and they issued no institutional statement about what their crowd management responsibilities are when a player who made bad choices in the previous year's tournament becomes the target of sustained fan hostility in the current one. The tour silence was the same. Jay Monahan has not addressed the Shinnecock crowd behavior. The PGA Tour's player advisory structures have not raised the question publicly.
Clark raised it himself, at the microphone, in front of the cameras, while holding the trophy. That is a player who understood that if nobody in the institutional structure was going to name what happened, he was going to have to do it himself. Should the USGA be held accountable for the crowd environment at Shinnecock Hills? Or is managing golf gallery behavior fundamentally different from other sports? Comment, USGA accountable or different from other sports? Here is where this lands.
Wyndham Clark won $4.5 million at the 2026 US Open while an American crowd cheered for him to lose. He held a 6-shot lead, watched it shrink to 1, made the birdie that mattered on 16, and parred 18. Then he walked to the microphone and said the crowd's behavior made sense to him. Then he named Scheffler as the person they deserved to be rooting for. Then he asked them to stay with him. Scheffler, who was the person they were rooting for, told the press room the crowd went somewhere he was not comfortable with, on his birthday, after his Grand Slam attempt came up 4 shots short. He called Clark a well-deserving champion. Those two men in those two press conferences in the same afternoon produced more honest self-reflection than the USGA and the PGA Tour have offered about Shinnecock combined. Clark goes to Royal Birkdale as a 2-time US Open champion. He does not need anyone's approval to compete. but he said he wants to win them over eventually. Whether eventually starts at Birkdale or takes longer is the question the next chapter of his career will answer. Subscribe for full Birkdale coverage starting this week because Clark, Scheffler, and McIlroy are all in that field, and the dynamic between those three players heading into links golf after Shinnecock Hills is one of the most compelling storylines the sport has produced in years.